Welcome to another episode of the CC Podcast Conversations, where inspiring Christians share their faith-filled stories. Please take a moment to subscribe to this podcast, leave a 5-star rating, and write a review. This helps push our content to a broader audience. Are you new to listening? Check out our other podcasts. First, the CC Podcast Daily Dose Devotions, where we're walking through the Bible, focusing on short clips of Scripture. Second is the CC Broadcast, where our weekly radio programming is archived. These podcasts are available wherever you're listening or at ChristianCrusaders.org. Okay, let's get started with today's episode. Here's our host, Matt Reister, the Executive Director of Christian Crusaders.
Hey everybody, Matt Reister with the CC Podcast Conversations, and we are at NRB, the National Religious Broadcasters 2022 convention in Nashville. We've got an amazing interview coming up right now with a guy named Joshua Broome. And let me just say this before I give Andrew a chance to say something. This guy came out of the sex industry. Like, he's a porn star, like a really famous one, and came to Christ, totally reformed his life, and is using that as a platform to share his story and do ministry. And so, needless to say, there are, and he even told me after the interview, there are a couple questions I asked that he's never been asked before, which he was happy to answer. But This is going to have some sensitive content that if you are a parent, you might want to preview before you have your younger children listen. I'm putting my own filter. I'd let my kids listen to this.
Right.
But we're the kind of people that have these conversations with our kids, and so I just don't want anyone to be surprised by it.
Yeah, exactly. No, it's we've been having an excellent time here. NRB 2022. You would think 2022 is because that's what year it is. It's actually the number of interviews we've done here.
Almost, not quite, but goodness gracious.
Or the number of hours spent interviewing.
Getting back to Josh Broome.
Yeah.
You met him before I did.
So this was hilarious. You were talking to
Del Didway.
No, you were talking to Denise and Clay Pass, who was 3 interviews prior to this one.
Okay.
You were talking to her at the table, and I was sitting there sipping my espresso from 475, and this guy comes up and he goes, "Hey, I'm sorry, I don't want to interrupt your coffee," and I'm like, "Oh no, it's cool. What's going on?" And he's like, I was thinking he wanted a foam microphone, right? I mean, because everybody wants those.
We're handing those out.
Yeah, we're handing them all left, right, and center. And he goes, "No, I thought, I wanted to introduce myself. I know, I'm trying to share my story with as many as people as I can, and here's the deal." And kind of gave the same intro to me that you just gave, and I'm like, my jaw was about to hit the floor. I mean, from his, talk about having a 30-second an elevator speech. Yeah, elevator pitch for your faith. And his elevator pitch for why we should interview him, I was just, my jaw dropped. And I was just like, wow. And then he starts talking about, I'm gonna live in Dallas. We're about to move to Dallas. And I was like, oh, okay. He's like, yeah, we live in Iowa now. And I'm like, oh, I know where that is. And so then we connected on that front, and his wife was a cheerleader for Iowa, I think you said. So so that was got all kinds of Hawkeye connections. So
they live in Central City, which is down by Cedar Rapids. One of the things in a situation like this, and I only had to, after you introduced me to him, I only had to talk to him for about 2 or 3 minutes to kind of get all these questions kind of vetted to decide we wanted. There's no question the story on its face was like, wow, this is a story people are going to be interested in listening to. But one of the things I'm always a little skeptical about when I hear some crazy story is, like, are you just here to tell a crazy story?
Right.
To like shock value people?
Right. Or
are you here to actually talk about the Lord?
Right. Exactly.
And so I was kind of feeling that out a little bit with him. And I mean, just no question. And people will pick up on that in the interview. I mean, he was crystal clear and passionate about the gospel. Yeah. Very articulate. He got discipled hardcore. He's very familiar with Scripture.
Yep.
Got a degree from Liberty University and is preaching now.
Yep.
And so this is not just an amazing story, but the way he uses his platform is powerful, because it's not just like, oh, listen to this crazy story, now give me my check and I'll go to the next town and tell it. You know what I mean?
Exactly. And something actually your wife told me earlier today when we were discussing kind of the lineup of people. She said, the interviews that we've been doing, not just this week, but even before we got to NRB, they're not just inspiring stories from interesting Christians. I mean, that's our tagline that we use for this, but it goes beyond that. It's God is working in this person's life, and he's working in your life too.
Yes.
And that is just, hearing not only Joshua's story, but the other ones that we've talked to today, and I'm sure the other ones we're going to talk to here in the next 24 hours. That's absolutely should, I hope, inspire people to say, yeah, wow, God's really working in that person's life in this way, this person's life in this way. How's he working in my life?
Yes.
And I love that. Your wife has a wonderful heart for that and a wonderful observation. And I hope that we can convince her to get in front of a mic and share some of those nuggets of wisdom
good.
soon.
We'll do that before we leave, hopefully tomorrow. So this is another great interview along with the others we've done this week. And thanks for tuning in. Enjoy this. Be sensitive with it, but share it with folks, because it's going to be a impactful interview. Thanks for tuning in. Hey everybody, Matt Reister here again. I'm at the National Religious Broadcasters Convention in Nashville, and it's been like drinking out of a fire hydrant. I mean, we are first-time exhibitors here, and last year was my first time at NRB. I haven't been doing this job, the director of Christian Crusaders Radio and Internet Ministry, for very long, and I had no idea how many different interview requests would come to us. And we left a little bit of time in our schedule for just kind of random impromptu things that came up. I saw an email or saw something about you, and I remember a flash in my mind like, man, that'd be great to talk to that guy. I never got back to it, but you stopped by the booth. Boom. So I got Joshua Broome here. That's Broome, but it's just like the thing that witches ride. Yeah. And that's a little bit. Anyway, long story short, this guy was involved in the porn industry and was saved by God's grace and is now doing ministry. We're going to hear your whole story, and I'm really excited. It's like several people have come up to our table kind of pitching themselves to be on our podcast. Like, we're not a big deal. I mean, this is not a huge podcast. Yeah. It's kind of a small audience. We're growing. We're getting established. Yeah. And I've figured out a lot of polite ways to tell people that our schedule's full. But, I mean, about 2 sentences into meeting you, I was like, this story needs to be told. And so thank you for being here.
Yeah, absolutely. Glad to be here. I kind of came out here on a whim. Because I was in Chicago yesterday, and I just got back from Dallas recently, and I just was able to squeeze in a day. So I flew in early this morning, and I'm flying out early tomorrow morning. So. Wow.
So what's crazy is you live in Central City, Iowa.
Yeah, so my
wife
down
the road from us, but it's like no one knows where that's at.
Yeah. So I mean, it's in proximity of Cedar Rapids, or if you don't know where Cedar Rapids is, it's in proximity of Iowa City. So you probably know where the University of Iowa is if you watch football, or they're decent at basketball this year.
I guess they're killing Northwestern right now in the Big Ten tournament.
Yeah.
I'm a Hawkeye fan, but I've been so busy I forgot they even played today.
Yeah, I have to be because my wife cheered there. So she was the W for all.
Oh, IOW.
Yeah, she was the W. So big deal for her.
So we're going to have some Hawkeye fans in our audience. I is the student section corner. O is the northwest corner. W is the northeast corner.
Right.
That's awesome.
Yeah. So like each year, we've been married for almost 6 years, and 7 times actually we went to an alumni game, and generally it's a basketball game because the cheerleaders that are current will travel with Iowa to a bowl game, and then basketball is going on, so she will cheer at the basketball game, which is so much fun.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah.
So where were you born and raised?
South Carolina. So I was born in a super small town in South Carolina, Pageland, South Carolina. So so small that I was born in Charlotte because no hospitals where I lived. We just got a Taco Bell about 2 years ago. It was a big deal.
Awesome.
So like that small of a town. Graduated with less than 100 people. Yeah.
I'm going to put you on the spot here. How old are you?
39.
39. Okay.
39.
So you were born in like 82?
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
Awesome. So were you raised in a family of faith and kind of walked away from it, or were you just not raised in the faith at all, or what's your kind of spiritual story?
Yeah. So I grew up going to church. I went to church on Sundays. I went to church on Wednesdays. I went to Vacation Bible School. So I knew a lot about God, but the church I went to, fire and brimstone, it's like, receive the gospel, you're going to hell, that type of deal. But for me, the biggest gap in between me and me understanding the gospel was me seeing fatherhood through the lens of brokenness, because I grew up in that small town without a father, but my father lived in that town. So I saw him.
Did you know he was your father?
Yeah. So I knew. So my mom had me when she was 16.
Okay.
So I see this guy that, as he gets older, he gets married, he has a family, and, they're doing a little bit better off financially than we are. And I see this person that is my father, but he doesn't play the role as my dad. So it made me feel like, what's wrong with me? And I have a very, in the 99 percentile achiever personality. So I tried to achieve that affirmation that I wasn't getting through scholastics, through, sports, through whatever it was. I just wanted to be the best so that I would have that momentary gratification that I felt like I was good enough, but it never lasted.
That is, I was blessed with a great dad. And I hear what you're saying so many times.
Yeah.
And I even see it in the lives of some kids who I don't even need to hear it from. You just see it.
Yeah.
That's such a common narrative, isn't it?
Yeah. I mean, I think for me, even though I heard the gospel, when I heard father, I distorted the gospel, because of when I saw a father, I saw God through the lens of what I understood a father to be. So it distorted his goodness.
Yeah.
It distorted the gospel, because even though I heard the gospel every Sunday, I couldn't see myself as someone who was worth being loved, because I had a father that was, literally miles away from me that didn't want me. So
what's your relationship with your dad today?
Yeah, that's a great story. So my wife, I can't wait to talk more about her, but out of the blue, we've been together for maybe 9 months. I think we'd just gotten engaged. She's like, hey, I did something. And she is very introverted, not very, other than her being she was in gymnastics and she was a cheerleader, in her right environment, she's loud and boisterous, but for the most part, she's pretty reserved.
Yeah.
She's like, I did this thing. She reached out to my half-brother that I've met a couple of times to get my dad's number, and gave him my number. So I think I called him. So she ended up getting me
your dad's number,
our information, and I called him, and I was a place in my life, because I'd been a Christian for about a year at this point.
Yeah.
And the first thing that I said, man, I've been so angry at you and have blamed so many things on you that were not your fault.
Wow.
And I'm sorry.
Wow.
And it was a release for me, because it was true. It's like I justified so many things in my life because of this false narrative, this this incorrect, plausible reality that I created based on a lie.
Yeah.
And it was all stuff that I had stirred up in my own head, in addition to trauma that was essentially self-inflicted.
But I mean, he did play a role in casting you down that trajectory a little bit, right?
And it's for a lot of people, it's what happened to them. For me, it was what he didn't do, and because of what he didn't do, I made my own presuppositions about myself.
Yeah. I did an interview, the very first podcast interview I did for this podcast a couple years ago with a guy named Ron Gruber, and the only reason I mention it is because I think listeners who are intrigued by this so far need to go listen to that. Ron Gruber was a former 1%er enforcer for a violent motorcycle gang, committed murder, did prison time, came to Christ, and is now out of prison and just doing some amazing things for the Lord. But Ron Gruber's story with his father is unlike anything I have ever heard. I mean, this dude's dad, and he's raised in Cedar Falls, Iowa. I mean, bad news. But Ron said something amazing, because I kind of said, how does a kid, I've never been like a victim guy.
Right.
Like, it's your fault that you sinned the way you did.
Right.
It's not anyone else's fault. And in his case, kind of like, if you can't do the time, don't do the crime. Like,
right. Yeah.
Sorry, dude. I mean, you're going to prison, and you should, maybe even worse than that, because you murdered somebody.
Yeah.
However, hearing the story of his father and how that all played out in his early years, it's kind of like, how does a kid in this environment even have a chance?
Right.
And Ron stopped me. He goes, here's the thing. He said, a lot of people want to say that. And he said, I get it. But he said, a lot of people take that background and use it to spur them out of the dysfunction. He said, I made it a crutch or an excuse to allow me to spin into dysfunction. Yeah. And that's kind of what you're saying.
Yeah, 100%. Like, all the decisions that I made were upon my own volition, but I did use that crutch, like you said. I did use that as, something that I used to justify thing after thing after thing. And then as my behavior got worse, then it became, well, I am my behavior. My worth is based on my behavior.
Your identity.
Yeah, and I created this whole identity because what I didn't have and what I did, and it just got worse and worse and worse.
So are you, like, fully reconciled with your dad?
Yeah, so he's...
Is he a believer?
Yeah, so he's...
Wow.
I can't wait to get more into, not that, but just other aspects of my family. But, so he's met my children. I have 3 boys, 3 boys under 4, so our house is pretty chaotic. Yeah.
What's your wife's name?
Hope. Yeah.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, it's like it was like, as far as like me coming to faith, it's like the little trinity of hope, because the church was Hope Community Church, and my wife's name is Hope, and she led me to find the hope that was found in
Where was that?
Jesus.
In Central City?
No. So in Raleigh, North Carolina.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, we'll get into your story here.
Right.
So you have this kind of pseudo-dysfunctional childhood,
right,
because you're not in touch with your dad.
Yeah.
Man, dads are so important.
Yeah.
I mean...
Yeah, and for me, like, my grandfather was there. Like, I grew up in my mom's parents' home. She's 16, so I grew up in my grandparents' home.
Right.
But my grandfather, he was retired, and he, like, when I say this man went fishing literally every day, like, there had to be something like severe inclement weather for him not to be on his John Deere boat out fishing. But I mean, he taught me several things. Some things that helped me as a person today, but for the most part, other than a basketball coach and a football coach, I didn't have anyone. This is how how you're a man, or model, like, what does a father look like, or what does a husband look like? What does that look like? I had no clue. So just like any aspect of society, if you allow something else that's not good to define reality for you, and you imitate or try to pursue that, it always goes really, really bad. Yeah.
So catch us up to the point where you got involved in the porn industry. Like, there's no way you just all of a sudden wake up one day and I'm going to go do that.
Right, yeah. So I started modeling and acting when I was 14 or 15, had a lot of success in that. Ended up, I studied theater for about 2 years in college, and then...
Where'd you go to college?
I went to Francis Marion University, but I finished school at Liberty University.
Oh, wow.
But that was super recently, actually.
Okay.
But went to school at Francis Marion University, which is in Florence, South Carolina, and I went there for about 2 years, just checking a box, and I knew that I wanted to act, I wanted to model, so I dropped out, moved to Hollywood, and like many people, I signed an agent, and I was working a little bit, but I was living far beyond my means. I was living in West Hollywood, and rent's expensive, and man, I had to get a job. I had to get a job like many people. So if you go to anywhere in Hollywood, it's like you might work at this place, but I'm an actor or a screenwriter or whatever.
Right.
So I was working
it's kind of like Nashville. A lot of people trying to get into music who work at Starbucks or whatever.
Yeah, so I was working at this place called Saddle Ranch. So it's in the middle of West Hollywood. It's been in a ton of movies because there's a gigantic mechanical bull in the middle of the restaurant.
Okay.
But it's like one of those places where it's a restaurant until 10 p.m. and then it's just like absolute chaos bar. But I'm working there, and 4 girls come in. They sit down. I'm going to wait on them, and I'm going to put my Southern charm on and get their number or get a big tip or whatever.
Right.
And I walk over, and they're like, hey, have you ever thought about acting? I was like, yes. They're going to introduce me to a casting, director, or maybe they're working on a project. They're going to introduce me to someone. It's going to be my big break. And they're like, no, we're talking about porn. And I was like, what? Because I had seen it. I had seen porn before.
Yeah.
But for me, I really believed that, like, those weren't real people. Like, those aren't people that do, like, that's not their job.
Yeah.
It's just people on a screen. You can't, like, really get your head around, like, those are actually living, breathing people, So, like, see these people, I was like, they're inviting me into their space. And they're like, hey, we would love to introduce you to our agent. And I was like, agent? I mean, now they were speaking language that I was familiar with.
Yeah.
And for some reason, it escalated the curiosity that I had. And I was like, sure, I'll meet with this agent. Even though in the back of my head, I was like, it's going to be, an old guy in a Motel 6, like, picking, like, belly button, like, lint out of his belly button or something like that. But I get there, and we're in Studio City, and it's adjacent to Universal Studios, and it's a private elevator up to his office, and
wow,
this guy sitting behind this giant desk, 3-piece suit, big fat double Windsor tie, English accent. And he asked me a few questions, and just in retrospect, just master manipulator. It's like, how did you grow up? What's your family life like? What are you doing out here? I was like, grew up single mom. I'm out here trying to be famous. He's like, great. You have acting experience? Awesome.
So you're saying, like, looking back, master manipulator, you're reading that now through a lens that goes, okay, he sees that I'm, like, ripe for the picking on this deal.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, so he asked, he quickly said, well, there's not a lot of good-looking guys in the industry. That'll work to your favor. And also you have, acting ability, and all the films in the industry, they're shifting and they're parodying movies. There's these big-budget films. And it'll be so advantageous for you because you have this acting experience, and you're a good-looking guy. You'll be famous.
What kind of acting had you done before?
I mean,
like, in commercials and stuff? Or?
Yeah, I mean that, and like you have your like legit movies, and you have your B movies and C movies. Like, I've done a few C movies where I was like in Bucharest, Romania. I was doing a voiceover, and I was holding the boom mic for myself. Not kidding. but I mean, I was getting some reps. I was doing some stuff.
It's like you're going to put in the time to get where you need to go.
Yeah,
you got to start at the bottom, and that's
where
it is.
Even more so with modeling, like, I was having some decent success. I've done like Fashion Week in Paris and Miami and stuff like that. I mean, I was in no way struggling.
Okay.
But we had this conversation, and what I heard him say was, here is a counterfeit version of your dream. And I see myself, and I'm like, man, maybe I'm not good enough.
Did you interpret it as a counterfeit version right from the beginning?
I mean, I heard, man, this might be it in my head. Like, man, I hear famous, I hear
money,
rich, I hear girls, I hear all the things that I believe at the time. If I had all those things,
you'd be happy.
I would be happy. And I mean, that is the most. Sometimes I get a little bit of pushback when I share my story, because, like, man, those things are unnecessary because it's glamorizing the industry. I'm like, no. I think I need to tell the totality of my story, because I want people to know that I did 1,000 films in the industry. I was nominated for Best Male Performer 3 times. I won it once. I made over $1 million. I traveled to every place I ever said I wanted to do. And when I won that award, I got notified a few days before, because it was going to be on Showtime, and they were like, hey, we want you to, articulate X, Y, and Z when you go up on stage. just, you've won the award.
What do you mean, like articulate X, Y, and Z?
So just like, since it was going to be on Showtime, it's like, we want you to say this verbatim, make sure that you've read over this because...
What, like to give prop to sponsors or to say... Yeah.
So I knew I'd won the award, and...
Wow. So that's interesting, a glimpse into award shows. So these people go up there knowing that they won.
Yeah, I mean, not all. I don't know. I mean, that was my only
in your industry.
Yeah.
Okay.
Because that was the third year I'd been nominated for it, and that was the first year I won it.
Okay.
So that was 2012, and then man, I remember literally laying on my face later that day, crying out to this God that I knew about, but I feel like I didn't know, and I just didn't want to live anymore because I literally had everything that I said. Once I get this, I'll be happy, and it actually illuminated and
Fame,
amplified.
Money, women.
Yeah.
Basically.
Yeah, it's like if I had all that, it's like, I traveled a lot, I had nice things, like all the stuff, like I grew up, not in extreme poverty, but, you know, like I would get one pair of, basketball shoes a year, and I had to take care of them.
Yeah.
So, like, just having all the things that I longed after growing up, because I looked around me and the people that had them, they looked happy, so that must be what happiness is. And then I had it, and it made my depression worse. It made me feel worse because it didn't work.
Yeah, it's interesting because I was just doing an interview before you that was a kind of a light-hearted, superficial, fun interview with a guy who's a sports writer and a Christian author of like Christian devotionals and stuff. And he's had access to a ton of like athletes and these big time guys. And we were talking about way back when Tom Brady won his third or fourth Super Bowl.
Yeah.
And Tom Brady's not a professing Christian, but there's this iconic clip of Tom Brady like on 60 Minutes or I don't know, ABC something, whatever, talking about how he basically just like out succeeded his wildest dreams.
Yeah.
And he says, I actually used it when I was preaching a sermon once. It's Tom Brady going, there has to be more than this.
Right.
Because, like, if this is it, it's pretty anticlimactic. You look at Tom Brady, or you look at you at that time, and you go, man, he's got it all. How in the world are you sitting there going, there has to be more? But it's just so revealing how empty the things are that we chase after that aren't Christ. Right? That's what you're saying.
Yeah, absolutely.
Keep going.
Yeah, but I mean, so in that moment, I didn't have the guts to take my life, but that's what I wanted to do. And I'm calling out to this God that I didn't know and just saying, I don't want to live, because I believed with all certainty that I ruined my life. There's no way that I'd ever be a father, I'd ever be a husband. There's no way that I would even contribute to an organization. What talents and gifts do I have? The only thing I've ever done was act and model. Like I've been on camera. I did a little bit of personal training, but other than that, it's just like it was all like aesthetics and abilities.
What was it about learning that you had won this award? Because you're saying you had this response pretty much right after you learned it.
Yeah,
had that been building, and that was the culmination, and it's kind of like now my name's going to be out there. It's etched in stone now, and now I'm forever tainted. Yeah,
for me, it was always like I always wanted to score more points than everyone else on the basketball court. I wanted to get more girls. I wanted to get the girl that no one else could have. Like I wanted the girl to say yes to me.
Yeah.
I'm like on and on and on. So for that, it was like I hadn't won the award, number one, and that's the pinnacle as a guy in the industry. Like you win that award, like you are the best. You're the man.
Yeah.
So it's like that's solidified. Okay, I'm the man, and it just kind of backfired on me because it didn't fulfill me in the way that I thought it would.
Wow.
So that's why it just wrecked me, because for 3 years I was like, I didn't win.
You're chasing it.
I didn't win, and it's like, I was taking on projects that no one else was taking. Like for me to do 1,000, like literally do 1,000 scenes in a 6-year period, like I was working 25, 30 times a month. So it's like, I can't even like fully describe like the level of like exposure. Like, sometimes like currently, like right now, it's like I teach and preach and I do things like this, and it's like anything that I do it with all that I have.
Yeah.
And there's a feeling that I have sometimes, especially if you're preaching multiple services. It's like you just feel like depleted and exposed to it in a certain way, where it's like I have to take like steps for to set boundaries and to because I feel spiritually attacked.
Not even attacked, but like I've done like 15 or 12 interviews or whatever in the last 2 days. I'm a people person. I love being around people. It's like I went to our hotel room last night. I was like, I don't have any more words to say.
Right.
Like I'm wiped out.
Yeah, I'm all extroverted out.
And all I did was sit here and talk. But I mean, that's what we're talking about. Now, here's the thing. I told you before we talked, like, I want this to be really candid. And so I might ask you something that you're like, I don't want to talk about that. This might be one of those questions.
Okay.
And this is going to end up making me need to put a preface on this episode about this. Maybe it contains some adult themes. So parents listen to this before your kids do, whatever. 25 or 30 porn scenes in a month.
Yeah.
Like, how is the body capable of that?
Yeah. I mean, so pretty much everyone in that industry is taking some type of erectile dysfunction medication.
Okay. I was wondering that.
So it got so bad, like the depression and the like, because you like people believe the lie that there's two people having sex and there just happens to be a camera.
And it's like,
the reality is there's camera A, B, C. There's someone with a boom mic. There's someone with a C light, and there's catering. There's a random person sitting in the corner. There's two assistants that probably don't need to be there. That just want to watch. Someone's eating Doritos over in the corner, and then you're sitting there doing that, and it's so demeaning, and you're so exposed. Like, so I got to the point where the last year of my career, I was taking Caverjack. So Caverjack is something you inject for paraplegic people to be able to be intimate with their spouse. So you inject it, and you're good for 4 hours, and if you use too much, you have to go to the hospital and get lanced.
Wow.
So, and then there's some directors that not make you take it, but if you want to be hired often, you're going to take it because, so the director is paying for the house they're shooting in. They're paying for the permit. They're paying for the equipment, the whole production.
So
they're paying for everything, right? So the guy is the only person that doesn't get paid for certain, because if the guy doesn't do his job, there's no content.
Wow.
So everyone else has to get paid because they showed up and they did their part, but the guy doesn't get paid because you failed the scene. So now there's no content.
Wow. So what's interesting about what you just described is it really pulls the veil back on porn. Like, this is all just a farce.
Well, I mean, the reality is, just like any other movie, like you think you watch porn and you think, okay, there's two people that want to be there and they're having this moment of intimacy. And the reality is, you're watching who knows how much footage that got edited. There's a director telling them what to do, that move this way, move that way, watch out, there's a light, the mic's in the frame or whatever. So I mean, it's not like this intimate moment that's
mechanical.
enjoyable. It's so monotonous that, like, to be completely honest, I got to a point where I didn't care. It was with who, with what, it doesn't matter. And then like shaking someone's hand and looking them in the eye absolutely terrified me.
What do you mean by that?
Well, because it was real. Like, everything about my life was fake. My name was fake. I was like, Tropic Thunder. Like, I was a dude playing a dude disguised as another dude every day.
Wow.
So, but also I was portraying an act of intimacy and trying to make it look real.
Yeah.
Because, like, I'm sitting there, like, pumped full of,
Caverjacks.
You have Caverjack or Viagra or Cialis or sometimes all three, and then you're shooting 4 or 5 hours, sometimes more, and then there's people standing around, and then I mean, there's just so many aspects about it. It's like
no one cares about you.
Right.
You're just like
you're literally
a piece of meat,
prop.
basically.
Yeah, absolutely.
Now, this is going to take it to the next level, but what is, like, for the woman that's involved?
Yeah.
What's going on there, like, physiologically? I mean, are they doing 25 scenes a month?
No, I mean, the girls, like, for like a girl that works a lot is probably working like 10 or 15 times a month. Like, that's working a lot. So girls get paid like about 60 to 70% more than guys do, and also like the director is going to hire pretty much the same group of guys every single time, because if the director can't trust you, they're not going to hire you because you could wreck the day.
Yeah.
So it's like, once you have trust with that director, he's going to hire you every time, because it doesn't matter.
A track record of performance.
Yeah. So girls are shot more, like, less often because they don't want them to be shot out or whatever.
When you said you didn't win it the first year, you didn't win it the second year, you won it the third year. What do you have to do to separate yourself to win it? Is it just a function of more scenes, or do you just have to like get crazier, like be more bought in? Or?
Yeah, I mean, for me, I was successful because I was consistent. Like I was willing to compromise myself to take the drugs or to do whatever I was asked. And like, to be honest, like for me, like I never abused drugs, and that was something that's real. Like, do most people show up like hammered or like on drugs? No, but did it happen often enough for it to be a problem? Yeah. So it's like, man, the fact that I was a dude that took that somewhat like to be like candid is like, I took the job serious. It's like whatever I'm doing, it's like I'm going to be the best at it. I don't care what it is. I'm going to be the best, and I took it seriously. And so in a place where I was a good-looking guy and there wasn't a lot of good-looking guys, and I had acting ability and I showed up on time and I was dependable. Like those are things. Like, it wasn't because I was great. It was because I did my job. I did it, and I showed up. I was strangely a normal dude in a very unnormal industry.
Yeah. That's so fascinating. So I've got a couple other questions, and I guess I'll just ask them now. I feel like you're in the middle of telling your story, but and you might get to this. But so you were raised going to church, so I assume your mom is a believer, or your grandparents, or? Yeah,
so my grandparents, strong Christians. My mom kind of, as well, we can go ahead and get into it now, but like my mom, like, I don't know where she stood, but I mean, we went to church, we did whatever. We went to church, we prayed, but it was never like a topic of conversation in our home.
Yeah.
Like, if anything, we're listening to Christian music, maybe.
Yep.
But I give my life to Christ. I stay in ministry. So I end up interning at a church for about 4 years. And then I was on staff at a church in Oklahoma. And then while I'm on staff at that church in Oklahoma, my mom had flew in, and there was like this big staff retreat or whatever, and she was there watching our kids, and we were just like having this conversation, and I was telling her about Romans Road. Like, I was like, I'm trying to like work with young adults. It's like, for some reason I feel like, because of social media, it's like it's really trendy to be like theologically eloquent but not really know the gospel.
Yeah.
So it's like I wanted to help young adults be able to articulate the gospel clearly.
And the Romans Road, for anyone who doesn't know, is a method to share the gospel through the book of Romans.
Yeah. From like a theological standpoint, it's like you read through the book of Romans, it's like you get it.
Yeah.
And
it's my favorite
so
book.
I was trying to, just to unpack that with her, just really just as someone who's very extroverted, just like process what I wanted to do, and then just like a light bulb went off for her, and she'd had her own struggles, but like for her, it's like it just made sense for the first time. And then the next day, like she came to me and we prayed about it, and she just like really like poured out her heart to me. It's like, I feel like I've been missing out on this relationship aspect. And on that day in my backyard, in the whole like the staff that I was on with church, everyone came over, and I baptized my mom in the pool in her backyard.
That's cool. So what I was getting at with asking about your mom and your grandparents, like, they must have, your grandparents, if your mom was kind of around it, but she wasn't really a believer, maybe to a varying degree, they must have been somewhat like devastated about what you were doing.
Oh, yeah.
They knew about it, I assume.
Yeah, I mean, and it wasn't, for the disappointment was never because of the porn. It was always because, like, you were destined for greatness. Like, you are capable of so much more. Like, you are capable of so much more, and I'm disappointed in you because you're choosing to spend your life doing that. Like, you're wasting your life doing something when God has made you to do something so much bigger. And that was I just didn't understand. It's like, what do you mean? Like, what am I supposed to do? Like, who am I?
Yeah. Yeah. So slow down through the story now, because you said, like, I was doing this, I win this award, and then we jump to, I gave my life to Christ, I got married, my mom came out to Oklahoma. Like, fill in some of those gaps.
So I win that award. I struggle with depression and thoughts of like self-harm for several weeks, and then I'm continuing to work. And I get a check, and on the checks, on the memo, it says what it's for, right? So it's a graphic name of a movie on the memo of the check.
Yeah.
So I would always go ATM or Dropbox. I never wanted to face the music. I never wanted to look
a teller in
the eye. It's like, here's this thing for blah 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 XXX. It's like I didn't want to do that.
I've got a buddy who writes stupid stuff in memos just to like make his friends feel uncomfortable for that exact reason.
Yeah, absolutely, and it's a real thing. But it's like, on this day, I didn't have the option to do that. So I was like, whatever, nothing matters. I'm just gonna deposit the check. So I hand the teller the check. She asked me, do you have your account number? I'm like, no. Here's my card. I swipe it. She puts it in. Blah blah blah. And then as I'm leaving, I pivot to leave, and the teller looks at me and says, Joshua, is there anything I can do for you? Joshua, can I help you? And
describe this person. Like,
it was a woman that was probably like in her 50s.
Yeah.
And just like very kind and like kept like eye contact with me.
Wow.
And for me, that was a big deal because like very like Genesis 3, like because of my sin and my shame, I hid, and I went into isolation, and I stopped returning texts from my mom. I stopped returning texts from my brother. I stopped answering phone calls. I deleted all of my real friends
Months,
for about
years?
18 months.
Okay.
So in this moment, I'm hearing Joshua that I haven't heard in over a year.
Because you got all these fake names.
Because I went by a fake name.
Yeah.
So I hear Joshua, and it just like snaps me out of this like, this fog I'm in. And it's like in that moment didn't like lead me to run to Christ,
right?
But it did make me feel the pain that I was numb to, and and what I really felt in that moment was, man, my mom had done everything. My mom's incredible, and just knowing how much it had to hurt her to text me time after time after time and call me time after time after time for me not to answer. So just the guilt and the weight of that in that moment, I just like, okay, I'm done. I pick up the phone and I call my agent, I call like my PR guy and like put out a press release. I'm retiring. I'm out of here. I quit. And I thought like, okay, I'm going to cover it all up. I had a Celtic cross tattoo on my shoulder. Big Timberlake fan, big Justin Timberlake fan. So that's why I had it. It was no religious like significance whatsoever.
Yeah.
But pretty ironic.
Yeah.
But I cover that up and I delete my social media and I move across the country from Los Angeles to North Carolina. And I meet it with my mom, and it's very like prodigal son moment. I'm like, please just don't make me like be in the pigsty anymore. And she like welcomes me home, and she never said like, I told you shouldn't do that, or like made me feel guilty at all. She's like so glad that I was there.
Amen.
But then I was like, okay, what am I gonna do? What am I gonna do with my life? Like I can't put what I've been doing for the last 6-7 years on my like that's not gonna be a good resume.
Yeah.
And it's like I just pretty much said acted and modeled before that. It's like I have no interest in getting my picture taken, It's like I don't want to be on camera. I want no part of that.
Yeah.
So what am I going to do? And like the only thing I'd done, I personal trained for a little bit and got like a little like weekend certification.
Yeah.
So I was like, that's my only option. And I just, like shooting fish in a barrel. I sent out like I don't know, like 100 resumes or whatever, or just 100 like, hey,
promotional things
like,
or whatever.
I'm your guy, hire me, And someone hired me, and I was working there for a while, and then I was like, I'm good, life's gonna be fine. And then all of a sudden it's like, oh, you're that guy. How
are they finding out? I mean, just
I
all
was
over the
literally
country
the
know
most
about it?
famous like male porn star in the world at that time. So I mean,
wow.
I was like, you know, it was like back in like 2012, so like Skinamax was still a thing. So, you know, any like HBO late night or any Showtime, I'm the lead on all those movies. So,
wow.
I mean, I've probably done 100 of those. So, like, they're everywhere.
My audience should be relieved that I have no idea who you were until we met today.
Yeah, there you go. But it's like, you know, it's like that. So, people were like, you're that guy. Like, even like calling me by the name, like knowing, like, you know, like, you're that guy, da, 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 da. And
you haven't come to Christ at this point yet, though.
No.
You're just trying to run from this.
Yeah, I'm just trying to run and cover it up, and that's what I continue to do. I lied until I was found out. Like, I would try to date someone, and then I would get found out, and they would, you know,
give me an example of how you get found out. Like someone.
Oh, just, you know, I was just in California, just, you know, doing modeling and acting. Like, no big deal. Please don't Google me. Just, you know, like like that, and then. Someone would say something to them, and I would get found out. So like, and like, I was also like,
that's got to be difficult.
Yeah, it was so frustrating, and it was like I couldn't run far or fast enough, and then I just kept working. It's like I took the same work ethic, like in the gym. I worked my way up to being a manager. There was another gym in the area that their general manager left, and this is, you know, about 2 years into this, you know, I've been kicking butt in the gym as a personal trainer and just like developing systems and like doing all this stuff and just like doing everything I can to like get this certification, get this, you know, education, get whatever I could just like to better myself, but all while having night terrors every night, because I had pretty much the same dream every night. I was like naked in this room, and everyone was like, you know, called me by that name, like, oh, like, we know who you are, we know who you are, we know who you are.
Wow.
It was just like, it was relentless. And about
like
2 years,
it's the opposite of what you're trying to do.
Right.
You're trying to run from that, and everyone's not letting you forget it.
Yeah. And then like 2 years into this, there's a new girl in the gym, and I'm like, I walk up to her, and she just finished working out. I'm like, hey, can I put your equipment away? She's like, no thanks. I was like, okay. And then I was like, well, could I take you out to dinner? She's like, no, I'm okay. I was like, man.
So she's dogging you out hard.
And I was like, well, she suggested, it's like, well, we can go for a run. I was like, I hate running. You know, I like to sprint. I like to lift weights. I like to, you know, heavy or fast is what I want to do. She's like, you want to run like a 5K? You want to like run for like, you know, 30, 45 minutes straight? Like, no, but yes, I will.
Yeah.
And we meet up at this park to go for a run, and that run quickly turns into a walk, and I'm just like, I have this weight. It's like, man, I can't hurt this person. I can't lie to her. So I'm just going to tell her, and then, you know, she'll tell me to take a hike, or worst case scenario, maybe she'll slap me, or maybe I'll get fired from the gym. I don't know, but just like, I'm just so tired
of running,
looking over my shoulder and just waiting for someone to find out about my past. So I was like, hey, I did a little bit of porn. Okay. She's like, excuse me, what'd you say? And I was like, okay, you know, I'm like, okay, Josh, you can do it.
So this is in the context of a conversation. You're getting to know each other. Like, what's like your past? Where did you work? Where did you live?
Right. So it's like she came to the gym that I worked at, you know, so I saw her for an hour a day for about 2 or 3 months. And, you know, we're out on this run. And
so is that the first time you'd done anything like outside
the
gym?
Yeah. So that, you know, we meant to run, but we ended up walking because we were talking.
Yeah.
And then I tell her, you know, I did a little bit of porn, and I was like, she's like, excuse me? And I'm like, okay. And then it's like, ripped a Band-Aid off, you know, like I told her everything, you know, it's like, you know, everything I did. And after I, you know, spill my guts, she's looking at me and she's like, I didn't expect for you to say that.
Yeah.
And then she says, well, I want you to know something. A person's not defined by the worst thing they've ever done.
Was she a believer?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then she's like, well, the greatest thing you'll ever do, that doesn't define you either. Yeah. God defines who you are.
Wow.
Do you know who God is? And for me, for most of my life, you know, we're sitting here at a table right now.
Yeah.
I play the role of, I am whoever I believe you want me to be.
Yeah.
So I'm going to put on the mask of whoever is going to
do the scene, whatever.
Yeah, whoever's going to gain me your affirmation and acceptance is who I am. So I put on the mask. It's like, I believe in God. I know that time, space, and matter came into existence at the same time. There had to be a catalyst for that creation. So absolutely, and I believe that to be true. I believe that God was real.
Right.
And then she was like, okay. She said, well, what does your relationship with Jesus look like? Are you praying? Are you walking with Him? What's God teaching you right now? And I was just like, man. And in that moment, I just I knew. I don't know. I don't know the answer to your question. It's I don't even know if
it's familiar language, though, right? From your upbringing.
Yeah.
Was it? I mean, was it
just that, and just I went to BSU in college. I went Baptist Student Union in college and stuff. So I had the information.
Yeah.
So, and taking classes in college and stuff, but I knew it, just not at a heart level.
Yeah.
So I'm saying this stuff, and it's now I just know. And then she shares with me I gave my life to Christ when I was 13, and this and that, and all my family is Christian, and this is what this looks like for me. I go to church here, and then all of a sudden we're talking about tacos, and I was just like,
what was she? This is totally interruption. What was she doing in North Carolina? She's from Iowa, right?
She's from Iowa. So ironically, she had moved to North Carolina with someone that she was dating.
Okay.
Who was an atheist.
Wow.
And so she was at a point where she was like, I know this is not going to work out, and I don't know. I don't know what I'm going to do. I guess I'm going to move home. I don't know. And we meet and we're having this conversation, and it was like, well, do you want to go to church with me?
Wow.
Next week or whatever. She's like, well, I normally go to church here, but there's a lot of people from the gym that I worked at and she went to that go to this church, nearby. It's pretty contemporary. It's it's cool. You'll love it. And I was like, okay, let's go. And for me, she had broke down boundaries because of the way that she responded to what I said.
You were saying, I interrupted you and said that we talk about this, and then we're talking about tacos. It was just kind of what?
Yeah, and it's
it's that's all the time we had to spend talking about me doing porn?
Yeah.
It was that freaked you out, that made an impact on you?
It had a huge impact on me because I 100% believed
it was game over.
When I told her that, it was game over and I was going to be rejected. And in that moment, she was like, well, okay, that's true about you, but that's not who you are in the story. But for me, it was like me experiencing, this, talk about we're to be imitators of Christ, and the peace that she had in her response, very Colossians 4:6, right? So let your speech be gracious and seasoned with salt, so you might know how you ought to answer each person.
Yeah.
So it's she was gracious, and her language elevated me to the point where I'm not going to reject me, and she cultivated curiosity. So when she said, do you want to go to church? I'm like, I need to know why you're responding to me this way.
Right.
And I was like, maybe I want to know God deeper. And we go to church, and long story, really short, but we go to church, we get there, gigantic wooden plaque with a mission statement on it. We want to love people where they are and encourage them to grow in their relationship with Jesus Christ. And I was like, you want to love me where I'm at? I don't know.
You don't know where I'm at.
Yeah, you don't know where I'm at, bro. You don't know. And we go. The whole experience is cool, aesthetically. It's I dig this. It is awesome.
Yeah.
And then I'm expecting, from my upbringing, I'm expecting to, this guy in a suit to yell at me and tell me that I suck,
Mm-hmm.
And I hear this guy get up there, and he reminds me of my grandfather. We're in Raleigh, so very Southern guy, just a button-up shirt on, no big deal, and just very vulnerable. And he starts telling the story of Mephibosheth in 1 Samuel.
Yeah.
And when he's telling the story of Mephibosheth, he's talking about how, David was this different kind of king, and him and Jonathan were tight. And when Jonathan died, Mephibosheth was the only, person left out of the lineage of his family.
Yeah.
And historically, whoever was in that previous kingdom was wiped out and killed because they didn't want anyone to have access to that kingdom.
Right.
So Mephibosheth thought that he was going to be killed, yet when David sent a king to him, he extended grace to him and invited him to his table, restored his land, not for a day, not for a week, but forever.
Yeah.
And then he pivots, and so much more does Jesus want to do for you. And goes, while we were yet, sinners, that Christ died for us. And he digs back a little bit, and he's like, you don't understand. It's like, the previous verses, it talks about how maybe you would die for a pretty good person,
right?
Or maybe even like a really, really good person, But you were enemies of God, and Jesus died for you, And there's a void in your life that you can't rectify yourself, And Jesus loved you so much that He willingly died for you, so that you can be reconciled to God. And for me, it changed the narrative of what a father was, And then I saw the Father's love. And I saw grace, and I saw mercy, and I saw His goodness, and it just wrecked me. And in that moment, I surrendered everything.
So, like the first Sunday you went to church with her?
Yeah.
Came to Christ?
Came to Christ. Like, knew for certain that I never knew Him.
So, like, wow.
And it's like, I'm like,
so
I'm a pretty emotional guy. I was like
church.
Rolling around on the floor, like crying. Not rolling around, but I was like.
Yeah. So you go to church the first time with this girl, this sermon about Mephibosheth and the gospel, and that just bam.
Yeah. So I think an important part of my story is not like that happens, I gave my life to Christ and everything was great.
Right.
I think it's really important because the most beneficial thing in my life is what I did next. So I went back to this church, pretty large church. It was like, five location church, not like a massive church, but I go to their main office and I'm like, hey, can I talk to a pastor? I'm like, sure, Pastor Gary's in here. And I walk in, I'm like, Gary, I feel like God wants me to build a boat. He's like, what? I was like, well, there's something that I believe God wants me to do that's bigger than I can comprehend. And my grandfather did teach me this. If you want to do something, learn how to do it well and find someone that's doing what you want to do and ask a lot of questions. So I was like, I feel like God wants to use me in my story in some way. I don't know how or what, but I want to be able to do it well. And he's like, man, there's this guy, his name is Andrew, and his family just moved from Dallas. He just graduated recently from Dallas Theological Seminary, and he's going to be here to help us launch another campus, but there's a few months before that's going to happen. Like, maybe he can like hang out with you in a little bit. So the expectation was for me to hang out with him one time, for him to just, this is what biblical context is, whatever. And we end up meeting once, and then we end up meeting 15 to 20 hours a week for 4 years.
Wow.
And he becomes a mentor to me. And more importantly, we would have hot conversations weekly, so honest, open, and transparent.
Yeah.
And he cultivated in me, because I pushed back a lot. Like, when you're in a prideful, broken place, constructive criticism is hard to receive. And like, he desperately wanted me to get to a place where I desired feedback and I would receive it, but it had to be bought with trust. He had to gain that, relational equity with me. And he just continued to pour into me, taught me how to read the Bible, taught me how to teach people how to read the Bible. We went through Greek in 1 year.
Wow.
Me, him, and Mr. Mouse, Bill Mounts.
Yeah.
And we went through that, I just loved it. And I ended up going to Liberty University online and studying Christian ministries with a focus on biblical theology, and just loved it.
One thing you said a second ago that I'm still trying to understand, you said, I want to build a boat. What do you mean?
I think, so really, really great. So I said that I wanted to build a boat. It's like, that was my way of expressing that I want to do something that's bigger than I can comprehend. I feel like I'm feeling prompted to do something. It's funny. So a pastor, Tim Ross, a buddy of mine, he's in Dallas. He's the pastor of MC City Church.
Okay.
And we were having a similar conversation about my past, and I was telling him that. He's like, man, I think you're the boat.
Wow.
And it was really profound to me because for, a long time I was trying to like figure out, God, what is it that you want me to do? What is it that you want me to accomplish? What is it that you want to do through my life and my story? I mean, it's like, and the reality is, a lot of things, but nothing at the same time. I want you.
You are the story. You are the thing.
Yeah, I want you.
Yeah.
And like, and that was critical for me to like really experience healing. And I've went to counseling and because I experienced so much mental and emotional trauma. So for me to get from there to like it's been 7 years where and also that girl that invited me to church and was bold in her faith. We've been married, so it'll be 6 years in July, and we have 3 sons. And it's crazy. I mean, it's like 5 years ago, someone asked me on a radio show that I was on. I shared my testimony for the first time, and then later, about 2 months later, he was like, "Hey, I'm having this event. Would you like to share your testimony?" And I was like, "Yeah, sure." It was great. What I didn't know is this was a live event where it was like other churches and like it was about 700 people there.
Wow.
And so for me, like theater guy, it's like, okay, I got my script. I'm going to go over my script. And then I get up there and this is, I've been working with Andrew for about like maybe 18 months or something like that.
Yeah.
And I get up there and I plan on telling my testimony in this very like vivid, like special way where it's gonna like be an amazing story.
Yeah.
And like as I stepped on stage, I just felt this like this weight. Like I felt like it was such a big deal, and it was, but I felt this like pressure to perform.
Yeah.
And then when I stepped on stage, like when I was stepped on stage, but when I stepped up to the mic, to the the pressure left.
Wow.
And I felt this like strange peace and this strange confidence, like the Hebrew word anavaz, like where we get the English word like humility.
Yeah.
It was like you're like this God ordained like given space.
Yeah.
I just felt like I stepped into this space that I never stepped in before.
Yeah.
And it was like it's important to understand like without God we can't do anything.
Right.
But when we try to do too much, we also can't do anything.
Right.
Or is it John 15:5?
Yeah.
Like if you don't remain in me, you're not going to do anything good.
Right.
So I'm standing there in that moment, and I have this script, and I got 17 minutes to speak, and I was going to tell my testimony in this profound way. I'm going to put on a show. I spent 3 minutes sharing my testimony, and the rest of the time sharing the gospel.
Awesome.
And ever since then, that's all I've ever wanted to do. And when I did that, that is when I felt like, man, that is what I want to do.
Yeah.
And I've been doing it ever since.
That's awesome. A few things, just questions that I jotted some notes down that I want to go back and just kind of, I'm curious, and I think people in our audience will be curious. So the check that you gave to the teller, who like kept eye contact with you and was kind of gracious and can I do anything for you? Like what's the pay like in that industry, and how do you get paid?
Yes, I mean I think it's a really important thing for your listeners to hear, because I made over $1 million my time in the industry through different things.
How many years?
So 6 years.
Okay.
So I would make between $1,000 and $1,200 a scene.
Yep.
So when you get to set, someone will say, "Hey, just fill this out. This is how you get paid." Right. Actually, what you're signing is you're signing away all rights to all video, all pictures, all audio, and the caveat that you don't pay attention to is we reserve the rights to sell this to a third party as many times as we want. So we can, break this down and repurpose it and resell it to as many people as many times as we want. We can manipulate it in any way.
And you get $1,000. Thank you very much.
You get $1,000. Thanks you for your day. We're going to make $1 million off of it.
Right.
So I say that it's important because, but yes, I mean, that's the answer to that question. But I think what's really important for people to know, so there's 30 people who I was in the industry with that, I'm in, my 30s and they should be in their 30s. But there are 30 people who I was in the industry with, and their career went like this. They were popular. Their popularity started to dissipate. They started escorting, and then that started to dissipate because they were no longer relevant. You can only escort. So escorting is glamorized prostitution. So you can only your phone will only ring to pay those high dollars if you are relevant in the industry, because that's how you're advertised. So all of a sudden their phone stops ringing from that stops working. You result to stripping. That's not making the money that you used to make. Now you've been groomed and told time and time again, this is who you are, this is what you do. You'll never be able to, get married. You'll never be able to do anything else. You might as well do this. Because like in the industry, there's like a no list, predominantly for girls, but like there's a no list, meaning that there's things that you don't want to do.
Yeah.
And what the industry will do, that agent will say, okay, you haven't done that. You've been around for a while. You're popular. Your popularity is starting to dissipate. They'll go to different studios. They'll say, okay, who's the highest bidder? Okay, great. You'll give me $50K for it? Great. Okay, goes back to the girl. Hey, out of nowhere, this studio called and they want to pay you $50,000 to do that thing. I know you said you wouldn't do it, but if you do that, you'll be relevant again, and then you'll be popular again. And so that cycle goes on until there's no more things to do, and there's no more phone calls, and all of a sudden you're a girl that's in your late 20s or 30s, and now you're quote unquote shot out in the industry, and 30 people who I knew took their life.
Wow.
So I say that to say this: those girls, all of their content is still on the internet, and it's being consumed in mass quantities.
And they're gone.
Even though they're gone.
Wow.
So it's continued to be repurposed, re-released, resold, and it's like a girl, like there was literally a girl like hung herself like in a park, and the next day a studio released like a best of.
Wow.
So those girls that maybe someone's listening right now and you're struggling with this.
You mean somebody who's struggling with pornography?
Someone who's struggling with watching pornography. So number one, those are people, not products. And those people, they don't want to be there. Like no one in the industry ever prostitutes themselves with cameras around and then lays their head on the pillow and it's like, man, I'm stoked that I do this for a living. No, you hate yourself. So these girls took their life because they believed that life was no longer worth living. And it was because they did this thing that you potentially are consuming, that industry is continuing to promote. So, I mean, I just think that's just something that needs to be said because it's real. And those people, and then, people are antagonistic. I have a relatively large following on social media, and I speak out against this often. And it's like, when I say stuff about those contracts, it's like, oh, you should have read the contract, bro. I'm like, I'm literally prostituting myself. Do you think I'm concerned about what this contract says?
Right.
Like, there's a guy, I'm sitting here like performing this movie, like having sex with someone, and there's someone eating Doritos 6 feet from me. It's like, do you think I care about what's on the contract?
Yeah.
Of course not.
Right. That's incredible. Your wife, so this is another question that you might not want to answer. This is, but there's some baggage there.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like the whole idea of, I just talked to a woman in an interview earlier today, and she's like, I won't get into her story, but part of her story was it was very important for me to wait to have sex until I was married.
Right.
And she was able to do that, but then everything didn't pan out the way that she thought it would, et cetera, et cetera. That's her story.
Yeah.
I mean, the reason people have that as a value is because they want to, have that be a special, intimate thing between them and their lifelong partner.
Right.
That's not your story.
Right.
And your wife, who knows what your wife's story is, but there had to be some we got to overcome this obstacle, right?
What was beautiful about our story was even though that she was a Christian, and she was still she was living with a guy, and she had moved it. It was like she wasn't perfect.
Yeah.
But we decided to okay, this is a miracle.
Yeah, totally.
So we want to walk in this relationship individually together. So we went to counseling and premarital classes when we got engaged. And it's like, we want to we want to be celibate. We want to honor God. We want to give ourselves to God. We want to pursue purity. And that's something that's people believe that's a lie, where it's purity is something that can be reclaimed. Like, today is the day the Lord has made, you can be glad in it, and today is the day the Lord has made, and you can be pure in it.
Amen.
Today. So and we get so caught up in legalities and trying to fit our faith in a box, and we limit how much of God we can receive, because he's so much bigger than your checklist. So for us, it was like we were growing individually but together at the same time. But for me, it was pretty unique, because even though like I had this gnarly past, she met me as this dude that worked at the gym.
Totally.
You know, like I was this goofy guy with too much energy that worked at the gym. So she never knew me as that person. She's never watched porn in her life, and she has no clue about it. So it's like for her, like, yes, 2 Corinthians 5:17 is real, and like that person is dead and gone, and I'm new in Christ. But also, she never knew that guy.
Yeah,
like
totally.
she never knew me as that person. So has like, you know, people like when we first started dating, especially when I first started like, you know, preaching Jesus crucified like on social media, it's like they were sending my wife like pictures. They sent like her family stuff. It's not
of
as bad
you
as it
from
used.
back in the day.
Yeah.
Wow.
Just, you know, it's like, because this person that I was a huge fan of, you've left the industry, and now you're saying it's wrong, and now you're talking about Jesus. How dare you?
Yeah.
So, you know, antagonistic people, it's like, man, I want a response from you, so I'm going to hit you where it hurts.
Yeah.
And even in that, man, it's like, my wife would just like, you know, delete, block.
That's cool.
And she's not someone who's like very like active on social media anyway.
Yeah.
Just like, she's like, it sucks. That sucks. I wish it didn't happen, but I'm not going to give them the power to impact my life. And I think like that's what people need to understand about social media. It's like not one person, for good or for bad, can impact your life or your emotions unless you give them access to it.
Oh, amen. And one other question on the whole thing and baggage and all that. Like, I don't mean this as a joke or trying to be funny or anything, but like marrying a porn star seems like you would have a lot of pressure on you. You know what I mean? Like, like your wife, like,
right.
You know what I mean? Like, wait a minute. Like, he's seen all the hottest girls in all the craziest scenarios.
Yeah.
And I guess I'm asking you a question that's maybe a question for your wife, but you certainly talked about that.
Yeah, I mean, for us, it was very different because I had only experienced lust.
Yeah.
And then when I experienced love, I realized that I'd never experienced that before.
That's
so
cool.
Every moment I've had with my wife, it's been new and exciting.
That's cool.
And it was because it was born out of something that was not self-giving.
Yeah.
And like, sex is a beautiful thing. It's awesome.
Yeah.
In the right context.
Yeah.
So for us, it's like if we did not walk out like that purity walk and that celibate walk, because man, like I didn't know what to do. I mean, to be honest, like the first time we hung out, like in a room together, I'm just like, look, and it's like, there's only one thing I know.
Yeah.
And it's like, I literally, like, I had to like, you know, like Second Timothy 3:16 talking about all scriptures God breathed and is good for teaching, rebuking, but reproof was a word that I really clung on to because I had to literally dismantle and destroy the way that I saw the world, the way that I saw God, and the way that I saw myself, and I had to like literally build up another foundation in how to appropriate myself in the world.
Yeah.
How to be like, I could be fake, like socially active, like I could be fake, I could be what someone, you know, I could be what I thought someone wanted me to be, but when I was in a moment where, you know, if you're in a room and there's no TV on and it's just me and you and we're just sitting there, it's like, I don't know what to talk about. I don't know what to do. Do I touch you? Do I not? Do I look at you? Do I not?
Right.
It's like, where are my eyes going? No, don't do that. You know, it's like, I literally had to like relearn how to live my life in an appropriate way. And that took time.
Yeah.
That took time. And it's like,
and it sounds like, I hear you talking, it sounds like all this is evidence of what you say, like the Lord blessing, like, you know, kind of lavishing on us.
Yeah.
What we don't deserve.
Oh, yeah.
Because that's the kind of God he is. Yeah, there are standards. Yeah, sin is real. Yeah, there's consequences for sin.
Yeah.
But grace is
abounds.
Huge in like
in
Christ.
And what I love about my story is there's so many people out there that have a radical testimony and they're afraid to share it, which I think like it should be shared in an appropriate context.
Yeah.
But Genesis 50:20, it's like what tried to destroy me, God has now repurposed and aimed it back at the industry that nearly took my life and did take the life of many people. So the fact that I preach with regularity, the fact that I have a theological education, the fact that I'm an NRB talking to you, it's so bizarre. And then like it's not something that I get tired of. It makes me excited. I when I get out of the bed in the morning, it's like I'm hyped to do what I do.
Yeah.
I get to work like full time. I work with an organization called Blessed Media, and like we champion like other influencers and creators and organizations and authors and stuff. My friend Rashawn Copeland, he has a portfolio of 700 million people that he reaches monthly, and we get like I get to play a part in that. And it's just so bizarre that God has like been so kind and so generous. Like I think like also for me, like Romans 2:4, it's like God's love and his patience and his kindness leads to repentance.
Yeah.
So I think like I'd been hearing the wrong gospel, or it's like repent or you're going to hell, you know. And it's like John 14:15, you know, if you love me, obey my commandments. And I'd heard it as if you love me, obey my commandments.
Yeah.
And that's not God's voice. But if you don't know who God is, you'll hear his voice in an inappropriate way.
I'm going to try to pull this out of my memory bank, but John 14:21 in particular, and maybe you can help me with it. Whoever has my commands and obeys them, he is the one who loves me.
Yeah.
And he who loves me will be loved by my Father, and I too will love him and show myself to him. And there's this progression in that verse where at the end of the day, what we want more than anything is for Christ to show himself to us.
Yeah.
Reveal us his will.
Yeah.
Reveal us what am I supposed to be doing?
Yeah.
Who am I? How do you want to use me? I mean, when you get that, you're living the best life.
Yeah.
But the pathway to that is to have his commands and obey them.
Yeah.
And not in a, like you said, I'm going to squash you if you disobey
not like
me.
This evil authoritarian like ruler.
But in a way that's like, because I love you and because I know that the most fulfilling life for you is a life where I'm revealing myself to you continuously.
Yeah.
The only way to that is to have my commands and obey them.
Yeah, it's just like my son, like my 2-year-old, don't touch the stove, it's hot.
Yeah.
I love you, so I'm going to tell you that.
Yeah.
You have to trust me and not touch the stove. You trust me not because of what I said, because of who I am.
Yeah.
So if you understand who God is,
you
will obey him not because he said so, because you trust him.
Yeah. Another note I wrote on here was in-laws. So what is it like when your wife brings home her boyfriend / fiance who has your past?
Yeah, I mean, if like, it was kind of like ripping off a Band-Aid because like all of that happened. So like she tells them, and then like they get all these like graphic images like sent to them, and just like, you know, all Hades broke loose right off the jump. And then kind of the dust settled, and then just like, well, he did that, just part of his story. It is what it is, you know? And like, I never have talked about it, you know, like never had been an issue like after that.
No, it's like if you own it, it's like the vitriol or the venom is kind of
I mean that's true
out.
Regardless of what your past is. Like you can choose to allow your past to own you, or you can own it. Yeah. And you know what you bring to light, it you know, like darkness is literally the absence of light. So whatever you put in light can no longer be dark.
Yeah. Yeah. So you kind of talked about the stuff you're doing now. I mean, anything else you want to say about what you're doing, what your plans are for the future? How could people follow you on social media? If you've written a book, any of that?
I'm in the latter part of writing a book, something I've been working on for about 5 years. So I wrote a book about myself, and God was like, "You idiot! How many times do I have to tell you?" So I changed it. So now it's 7 seasons of my life, and from each season, there's a practical and spiritual lesson from that season. So we haven't solidified on a title, but I'm working through that. I am Joshua Broome is my social across the board on Instagram, Twitter, blah, 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 blah. And then joshuabroome.me is my website. So regarding like speaking opportunities or podcasts or stuff like that, there's a contact form there. It's real simple. Just what do you want me to do? Why do you want me to do it? Who are you?
And you're basically based in Central City?
Yeah, well, for right now, so it looks like we're moving to Dallas this summer.
Okay.
The organization that I'm part of, they're based out of Dallas. But yeah, so right now, like there's a good old Baptist church in Cedar Rapids, Iowa that I preach at with regularity. I preach there next Sunday.
What church is it?
Good News Baptist Church.
Okay.
So it's on 3rd, in Cedar Rapids. But I preach there with regularity. But I preached in Manhattan. 2 weeks ago, I preached in Manhattan on Saturday, Brooklyn on Sunday, and then last week I was in Dallas. And
do you have any stories of other people who are in the industry because of your story coming to faith or getting out? Or
yeah. I mean, so yes, but there's more stories that aren't as heartwarming because I have probably 50 stories that go like this. They left the industry. They heard about Jesus. They couldn't reconcile their shame, and they either went back, harmed themselves, or they're living in this tension where they can't forgive themselves and they can't see themselves as someone who God could love them. So they end up in relationships where they're not loved and honored in the way that they should, abused. And also, when you leave that industry, like, if you're in the industry for a few years, like, what are you going to do? You know what I mean? Like, no one's got, like,
skill
degrees
or
or a resume, like, literally anything. There's, like, so the tension that I've seen, and there's organizations that's starting to come alongside these people.
Yeah.
It's like, hey, there are gifts and talents and abilities that are lying within you that Jesus wants to untangle.
Yeah.
And like maybe you're already leaning into them in a little bit, because I would argue if you're in the top 1% of that industry, there's something about you.
Yeah.
So look, God just wants you to reshift, repurpose, and redirect that light.
Yeah.
In a different direction.
Look at Saul, right? Who became Paul. I mean, this guy's going 100 miles an hour against Christ.
Yeah.
Damascus Road, bam, and now, we're going to have you write more than half the New Testament.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely. So it's like, in addition to that, it's like, I do get pushback. There are churches that, hey, man, I would love for you to share your story on our podcast, but don't come anywhere near my pulpit. You know what I mean?
Like you're tainted and like you're beyond.
But it's like so a lot of times when I have the opportunity to, I'm like, I was like, hey, here's a peek at my past, but here's what I want you to know. Moses killed a guy. David was the inventor of pornography. He saw something he shouldn't have seen. He took another look, committed adultery, killed Uriah. And then Peter denied Jesus 3 times. And what I love about Peter is he denied Jesus 3 times. And then you look at Acts 3, and he's preaching a sermon to a Jewish audience, and he's saying, "How dare you deny Jesus? You crucified him." So he's preaching through the lens of, I've been where you've been, so don't do what I did because I know how much it hurts.
I love that.
So I think it's just important to share, like, man, the Bible is full of people who were reckless and made terrible mistakes as deep and dark as murder. Like, like you were saying, like Saul turned Paul, like, he was a persecutor of the church, ripping Christians out of their homes and killing them. And then God used him to pen a large part of the New Testament. So if you look at all these people, whoever you are, whatever you've done, given your sin to Jesus, you can be redeemed, restored, and used in a way that doesn't have to make sense, because God wants to do something in you that's going to exceed your hopes or dreams or anything you can imagine.
Amen. I mean, that's what we're going to end it on, because it doesn't get any better than that. Joshua, thanks so much for coming over to our booth, introducing yourself. I don't even know how that all happened, but I'm glad it did, and I'm glad I was introduced to you.
Dude.
We're an hour and 17 minutes in, which is great. And I don't know, I'm probably going to reach out to you and have you come speak at a couple places if it works out.
Yeah, dude.
But anything else you would recommend anyone to read, look at, check out, website, anything?
Yeah, if anyone out there is struggling with pornography as far as the consumption, so I did a course called Search. So there's I think it's important. So there's two different options to choose from. Like one are for men, led by men, and the other's led by women for women. But it's called Search, and it's through loveministries.com. So that's where you can find that.
Loveministries.com.
Loveministries.com, and you can purchase that curriculum. Yeah.
Okay. Hey, Joshua, thank you so much.
Absolutely.
Yep.
The CC Podcast Conversations is part of Christian Crusaders radio and internet ministry, started in 1936 and is one of America's longest-running radio ministries. We are 100% donor-funded, and donations to our ministry are tax-deductible. So if you are encouraged, challenged, or inspired by today's conversation, please consider making a donation on our website, christiancrusaders.org, or mail a check to Christian Crusaders, 7401 University Avenue, Cedar Falls, Iowa, 50613. In addition to our other podcasts, which I mentioned at the front of this episode, I want to mention two of our other ministry partners worth checking out. First, the Cedar Falls Bible Conference, equipping believers with the truth of God's Word since 1922. Visit cedarfallsbibleconference.com for free access to previous conference content or for more information about upcoming events. Second is Power to Change Digital Strategies, an online ministry partnering volunteer Christian mentors with people around the world searching the internet for answers. If you or someone you know could benefit from an anonymous online conversation with a caring Christian adult, go to issuesiface.com. Or if you would like to be a volunteer Christian mentor, please visit p2cdigital.com. That's the letter P, the number 2, and the letter C, digital.com. See our episode notes for details and links, and remember to subscribe, leave a 5-star rating, and write a review. God's richest blessings to you, and thanks again for listening.